morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the third session of this week's Stakeholder Forum at NSAR. And I would like to invite Roger Bootlier, our CEO, to introduce our keynote speaker, Debbie Adams. And we're so pleased to have her with us today.
Thank you, Tanya. Good morning, everyone. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kmaq, the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We also would like to acknowledge the significant foundations that Black and African Nova Scotian communities have played in building our province and country. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way many of us work and made it harder for entrepreneurs. Being a business owner means adapting to the change, and Debbie Adams knows all about that. Today, she's going to share her knowledge and experience as a business owner and how she's navigated change and thrived. Debbie is an entrepreneur who lives in Lower Sackville. Originally from Upper Cove, Newfoundland, Debbie joined the Canadian Forces as a mechanic after high school and remained a service member until 29 when vision problems forced her to resign and ultimately led to the loss of her peripheral vision. Debbie didn't let that slow her down, though, and went on to obtain a Bachelor of Arts and Master's in Education from Mount St. Vincent University. She then opened People Can, a business dedicated to coaching and training entrepreneurs. Today, People Can is thriving, and Debbie's great work earned her the Nova Scotia Entrepreneurs with Disabilities Network Award in 2016. Today, Debbie has joined us for a frank and interactive session on entrepreneurship and how to fast-track your revenue through strategic connections and networking. Please welcome me in giving a warm welcome to Debbie, and I'll turn it over to you, Debbie.
Thank you very much, Roger and Tanya. I'm delighted to be here. I just want to ask everybody if they know where the chat box is in the bottom, and tell me if you've ever been to a presentation where a week after the presentation, if somebody said to you, "What did you learn?" you would have no idea, nothing stuck. So if that's ever happened to you, type it in the chat box. Yeah. It also gives you an opportunity, Tanya, or whoever is monitoring, to see if anybody didn't hear what I was saying. So it's a nice chance to fix any of the tech problems. As Roger mentioned, I'm here to talk about entrepreneurship. One of the things that I love to say to people at the very beginning is that I love making money. And I want you to gauge how it fits with you. And later on, we're going to circle back to it. I set up this format for presenting keynote talks, the format where we have 2 breakout sessions, because frankly, people will get burned out with Zoom. And if you've ever sat and listened to somebody drone on for 45 minutes on one of these things, you'll know what I'm talking about. I also know, as a trained adult educator and as somebody who believes in the apprenticeship model, and that comes from my years as a mechanic, we apprentice in everything that we do. And I use the apprenticeship model in business. And as adult learners, we need to engage with the material that I'm going to share with you today. It's not enough for you to just listen and take it away, go away and expect to remember what I said. The breakout sessions are designed so that you can have a chat with one another and you can say, well, I agree with what you're saying, or you can say, that's not really true for me. So we're going to get started with one of my 3 topics, and they are in this order: money mindset, building a strategically leveraged network, and impression management. And between, we're going to have 2 breakout sessions between, each of these sets. Before I talk to you about money mindset and why it is that I teach this as one of the essential keys to success in any business, regardless of the industry, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my money trajectory. So I was born in rural Newfoundland, as Roger mentioned, and I grew up in a family that would be considered working poor. Although if I asked my family what class they were in, they would say middle class. And I say that's because they had never seen very many other classes. We were a family of 7, and my father was a workaholic and a very prideful man. And I would be willing to wager that if you looked at a family of 7 who were on social services, they probably made more than my father did. But he just wasn't able to ask for help in his lifetime. So I got a real big bump in lifestyle at 17 when I joined military. And all of a sudden I had enough for a car, enough for a vacation, enough for a nice place to live, and all of the fun things that a young person would love to do. And I'm sure that you listening on here today have had times when you've had enough and more than enough and not enough money. Fast forward 11 years into the military, and all of a sudden I'm faced with not having enough. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, just more so you can get an understanding of who I am. I was considered to be groomed for leadership in the military. I was going places, as they like to say, stationed in Ottawa at the time after spending 6 years in Saskatoon. And my boss told me that I was to be promoted, moved to Germany with the Royal Canadian Regiment. And it was around the time of the first Persian Gulf War. He thought it would be a good idea for me to go to Turkey and hand out food supplies with the refugees, with the Army guys. I was Army, by the way, as a way to get to know them, because we're all going to be going to Germany together in the summer. Part of that process was we had to get a medical done. Now, keep in mind that that week, the week of the medical, I had, qualified on the range. I love fire and weapons. I had a brand new Monte Carlo. I drove to get all of my testing done. And little did I know that the last appointment that I had with the eye doctor was going to reveal something that was going to plunge me into poverty very quickly. I didn't know I had a vision problem, but apparently when I got my tests done, because of all of these movements around Europe and Turkey, it came to light that I had lost my peripheral vision. So I could really only see straight ahead. And at the time it was about 20 degrees. And at 20 degrees, you lose your driver's license. And in the Army, you also lose your ability to fire a weapon. And that made me, in 1991, no longer valuable as a soldier. Back in those days, when they got rid of you from the military, and I always call it that because it was a tragic event, there were no transition supports. So I went from having enough to making a little under $400 a month when I was kicked out of the military. And so that plunged me, way down low. And then it took me almost 10 years of trying to survive. And by this time, I'm 40 years old. And I figure out that there isn't much work for anybody in the blue-collar world unless you have an education, if you're a disabled woman. So I decided to go to university. And I'm 57 now, so that's 17 years ago. I went to university and I did a year of law. Didn't really, it wasn't really my thing. Went to university on a student loan and a disability pension. It was a hard slog as a single parent. And I finished university in 2008, applied for 3,000 jobs in Nova Scotia and couldn't find a job. I had an unusual background. So I had this protracted period of being very poor again. And 10 years ago, I decided that if nobody was going to hire me, I would hire myself. And this is where People Can came about. I have an income tax business and a business coaching business. All of that to say that I learned to talk about money where the rubber hits the road. From being somewhere where I didn't have enough to being in this place where I'm doing okay. It's a pretty good place. The learning that has taken place through all of those places have put me in a position where I'm able to now write on the topic, and everybody's going to get a free copy of my ebook, Money Mindset, How Changing My Mind About Money Helped Me to Succeed as an Entrepreneur. while we're talking, if you have questions, I want you to post them in the chat section, and I won't be looking at the chat, but Tanya will, and she's gonna, later on when we get around to questions after the breakout session, she will get your questions. So as they come up, just post them there. What I learned in my first 5 years of business, I did not have a storefront. I was a sole proprietor working from home, and mostly doing the income tax work. And as I would encounter clients, income tax clients who were in trouble with Revenue Canada, I would end up inevitably teaching them something that they needed to learn, mostly teaching a family member how to do the books, or I would have to teach them how to cost a project, and all of this stuff I picked up as I went. They would ask me how to do something. I would go and figure out how to do it and come back and teach them, till inevitably in 2015, I opened People Can Training in Sackville. And I got to tell you that those first years was more like dabbling, because I came from that military background with a great big heart to serve. And I also came from that rural Newfoundland, hardworking background with a tremendous unconscious bias against making money. And it was calling out that unconscious bias that helped me to move into a successful place in the next 5 years of my business. But the first 5 years were painful. And how that unconscious bias showed up was in an inability to charge what I was worth. You know, in my industry, in most businesses, we go out and we do market research, and we figure out what everybody in our industry is charging. And then we position ourselves somewhere. We don't want to be bargain basement, and we may not want to be at the top level, but we pick a place. Well, I had picked a place, but when it came to sitting down across from a client and telling them what it was that I had to charge, I would absolutely cringe inside. And so what was happening was, I said that my price was here, and at the time it was for income tax services, but really my price was here. Because as soon as the person told me some sad story about how they couldn't pay, I would start to, my price would go down. Or if I did happen to maintain my price, I would add so much value that at the end of the day, I was getting paid far less for what I was, for the return on investment was very low. Let's just say that. And so I've always had wise people. We're going to talk about a strategically leveraged network in our second session, but I want to mention here that I've always had wise people around me, and people who would tell it to me like it is, because I come from a background of people who don't, who love to tell it like it is, and we don't need you to sugarcoat stuff. But a very wise business person said to me, like, you're headed to, you're not going to last in this industry. There's no way you're going to last, because of your margins, because of your pricing, because of your tendencies to not be able to charge what you're worth. What's going on there? And so I had to go back and take a very long look at what is going on here. I was I was seeing people's tax returns. I was seeing what colleagues were charging, and I was definitely able to compare what I was doing to what they were doing. Now, I knew the quality of my work was in the same place, but if you had to judge the quality of the work by what I was able to charge, you could easily see that I must have thought that my quality was less. Wasn't the case. The problem was this thing called unconscious bias against making money. And so here's what I want you to think about as, when we go into the breakout rooms. I want you to be thinking about and talking about your heritage. Where did your money story come from? And what I'll tell you is this: the people that I have in my corner now who are more affluent, because along the way I have built a strategically leveraged network, and a strategically leveraged network is a fancy way of saying I needed to connect with people who weren't like me. I needed to connect with people who didn't have this affliction that I had. So I want you to think about your money story. When I said, I love making money, did you feel like, yeah, she's my gal? I'm picking up what she's laying down. I love making money too, without any guilt or resistance? Or did you have something inside that went something like this? I'm not sure I really like her. She's getting on my nerves already because she said that. Well, I got to tell you that in 2012, I went to a conference in Ottawa, and a lady walked out on the stage, and she's a pretty impressive business coach. And one of the first things that she started to talk about was how much money she had made and how much she loved making money. And I don't mean in a bragging way, but just talking about her metrics. And I could feel this thing inside of me that was all judgy because she was affluent. And I don't mind telling that, because we need to talk about this if we're going to move past this thing that's internally holding us back. And that was the first time that I really recognized I have something going on here that's standing in the way of me being successful. Everything that happens to us in life is something that we create. And I had created bankruptcy in 2010. And I'm not going to dwell there, but I was in a house at the time, and I saved my house from the bankruptcy. I had a foreclosure notice in the morning and a sale in the afternoon, and that saved me in 2009, because in 2010, when I went bankrupt, I didn't have a house in the bankruptcy. I will tell you now that I have impeccable credit, and I've been pre-approved for a mortgage. So I've come a long way. But all of that to say that I ended up in that place back then because I had money mindset issues, which impacted the way that I acted. We're going to be breaking out soon after this next little bit of information. So here's the heads up, Tanya. So as the first step to changing anything that we know that we do incorrectly, anything that we know that sabotages our success, the first step is raising awareness. The first step is saying, okay, I have this affliction. I'm not saying you have the affliction, but whatever it is that you're trying to change, the first step is saying, I need to change that. When it's something like attitude, in the adult learning world, we have skills, knowledge, and attitude. Attitude is difficult to change. When you have biases against something, it's difficult to change. But the first step is to acknowledge that you have the bias. And that bias will impact decisions that you make, as I've demonstrated. So if I was going to change, if I wanted to change how I felt about money and how I felt about people with money so that I could have a successful business, it's not enough to just say, okay, I'm going to change my mind about that. I'm not going to think that way anymore. It's really difficult to understand where these biases come from, because they could be centuries old conditioning. I come from a long line of people who have never been successful. But the other thing that we know about changing attitudes, aside from that it's very difficult, is that sometimes if we change our behavior, our attitude will follow. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. When I was in the military, we could smoke everywhere in those early days. In your office, sitting across from clients, can you imagine? Blowing smoke in their face. In a garage, fixing a car, cigarette hanging out of the corner of your mouth. And then all of a sudden the government came out and there was no smoking in government buildings. You can imagine how pleased everybody, as we started to hear rumors that starting on a particular date, we would have to go outside to smoke. And for the people that were against that rule, they were very loud, very vocal, didn't like it. And then all of a sudden, the rule comes in, everybody has to go outside. What do you think happens 6 months later? Rhetorical question. You don't need to answer it, but you can type it in the chat box. 6 months later, many of those people who were dead set against going outside to smoke, all of a sudden thought it was a good idea. Even started to talk about the benefits of going outside. At least I'm getting more exercise going up and down those stairs. All of the ways that we rationalize things. This is cognitive dissonance. When we have no control over something, we want our outside world to reflect how we feel inside. When we change the behavior, it's like the chicken and the egg dichotomy. When we change the behavior, the attitude will often fall in place. Another good example is seatbelt legislation. Long before my time, we didn't even have a vehicle when I was growing up. But long ago, they decided that seatbelts were going to keep people safe. And you had the naysayers that said, no, it wouldn't. Doesn't it resonate with some of the stuff that's going on in the media today? But once seatbelt legislation came in as law, all of a sudden those people who thought differently started to say seatbelts aren't such a bad idea. And all of a sudden they were on side. Their attitude changed. All of that to say that in the world of psychology, they don't know if your attitude changes first or your behavior changes first, but they do know that when your attitude changes, oftentimes there's enough evidence there to at least say, oftentimes your attitude will fall into line. And I have to say that I know that I have shifted from somebody who's not just service oriented, although there's a big service component in both my leadership style and my business, but I have an eye on profit. I love making money. This is what business is all about. And I do all of that guilt-free. And I would hope that you do all of that guilt-free. So I'm going to end there. What I want us to do is go into the breakout sessions, and we're going to limit it to 15 minutes. And in there, what I want you to do is have a conversation about what you've just heard, what's coming up for you. When you come back from the group, we're going to take about 3 questions. So have somebody ready to ask a question before we move.
And Debbie, I believe everyone is back now.
Fantastic, and welcome back to the main room, everybody. And I understand that there was a little bit of probably confusion about what we were supposed to do in the breakout rooms, and I take full responsibility for that. But it's really just an opportunity to, one, get to know each other. It's a little networking opportunity. Think of it like if you were at a regular conference and you're sitting at tables, and now you'll have a chance to chat about anything, but hopefully about the topic. And so the next breakout room will handle that a little differently. So Tanya, if you could look and see if there's any questions coming in around the topic of money mindset that people would like to ask about before we move on to our next topic.
Sure, nothing yet.
Nothing yet, but I'm going to keep on talking, and if anything shows up, you can just interrupt me.
Okay.
Just to wrap up the money mindset piece, and know that if you don't if you don't look after the money mindset piece, it might stop you from being able to grow your real estate business or get in on those big deals. We're going to talk about strategically leveraged network now, and some of these things like the money mindset and the selling to affluent people, for example, they intermingle. So one more check-in.
Yes, Debbie, we do have a question from one of the groups. What are some daily activities that you can do to help you change your mindset?
Well, I will say, remember I said about paying attention to when it comes up and pushing against that. So let's say, no, here's a more practical example. One of the things that I did early on, and we'll talk about this more in the networking piece, was I put myself in a room full of people that I was resistant to be around. So I had this inherited bias against people with money. And I can remember my father was always saying about how, he got rich in the backs of the poor, or how come he has a swimming pool and I have a bad back? And I can't tell you the number of times that I heard him say that. So I formed these opinions about people who not only had the knowledge, but also the resources that I needed to get ahead. So I made it a habit to join things like attending a Rotary meeting, where there were often people that didn't look anything like the people that I knew. I joined Toastmasters 10 years ago, and I got in a room full of people who were, sitting on the Senate committee of local universities, and they owned accounting practices, and people that I would never normally be around as a blue-collar person.
Thank you. We do have one other question or comment, I guess, is, how do you balance wanting to help others, giving back, while trying to increase revenue?
Fantastic question. I absolutely love it. Whenever I meet new business owners and they have this bias or this tendency to serve a little bit more than they have for making money, I tell them that to pretend that they are the CEO in somebody else's business, and or that it isn't their business, that they're the CEO, and would they allow you to do that activity that you're doing? If you're spending all of your time, whether it's donating your time, donating resources, giving money away, and you haven't covered the back end of business yet, it's problematic. So how do you balance it? Well, you don't balance it. Your number one priority as a business owner is to create a profitable business. And when you're in a position to do good in the community, you do good. I know that optics matter, but you can't sabotage your business just so everybody thinks you're a nice person.
Great advice, Debbie. Thank you. That's all the comments for now.
Excellent. I'm going to jump right into this next session because time goes quickly. And this is about building a strategically leveraged network. So in the early days of business, I just thought that I would do everybody's income tax return. Can you get everybody? I'm getting some feedback. Can you mute participants? And then I'll just unmute myself.
Yes, I believe I thought I had everyone mute.
Okay, I'm good now because I was getting some squeaky stuff coming through there. So in the early days, I thought that I would just sell, and it was income tax services mostly because I built out the business coaching later. I thought I would just do their tax returns. Most of the people who came to me were in trouble with CRA, so I had a negotiation piece. So I was attracting those types of people. I thought they would just tell everybody else. And of course, Debbie is great to work with, and she's so much fun, and she knows her stuff. You need to go there. Well, you know how far that gets you. My first coach said to me, there's three, your first people will be the 3 F's: family, friends, and fools. And I was just to get a little bit insulted when I hear that. But those people that are around you in the beginning aren't necessarily going to grow your building without a strategy, without a strategically building a network. And then the leveraging piece comes later. So I found myself in a position where I didn't have enough revenue and I had to do different things. I was lucky in the income tax business because I partnered with the mortgage brokers in Nova Scotia back when they wanted notices of assessment quickly. And there's a few firms now that have automated the process. I didn't go that route, but I could get notices of assessments quickly. And they helped to get the word out. If somebody was trying to get a mortgage and they weren't on side with Revenue Canada, I could help with that. So I started to build this strategically leveraged network. So I moved from just having people around me who were my friends and family to having people outside of myself who knew what I did, who could send me clients without me having to work so hard. And while at the same time, I was very highly motivated to be profitable. So I didn't just wait for it to happen. You know, it was a painful slog because every day I was learning something new, and you know, nose to the grind, reading about what other successful people were doing the hard work to build out all of these networks. And what I've learned along the way, not just from myself, but from other people, is that there is a definite correlation between the quality of your network and your revenue and impact. And so I got really curious about wanting to build in these other pieces. The colleagues, for example, for cross-marketing. So not necessarily colleagues in my business, although not necessarily colleagues in my industry, but I do have colleagues in my industry where we cross-market. For example, in the income tax world, I don't do T2 or incorporated returns. I just do sole proprietors. I have accountants who do T2 returns. And I want to talk about that for a second as it relates to SAGES. So in the first year that I had my storefront open in Sackville, I referred 14 of my clients who incorporated because it made good business sense to do so. And I referred them to accountants, but I didn't get anything for it except probably a pat on the back saying thanks. But anybody who uses an accountant knows that a client probably brings in, along with the incorporation itself, maybe that first year you're going to make $2,500 off of that client. So I referred 14 to the same person. This was back in my naive days. Then I met a sage and they asked me, what did you get? What did they give you? One accountant sent me a gift card for $100. One accountant of 2,500 times 14. You do the math. So I started to see how having people around me who could tell me how to have good business sense at that level was good for my business. So I needed to have more of those people around me. And I also found that if I developed this affiliate revenue stream from referrals, I didn't work as hard for the revenue. And as a matter of fact, when I refer somebody who wants to sell a business to a business broker, much like your industry, I now am able to leverage, this is where the leverage word comes in, that transaction so that I get a piece of his commission. And you know how that works. So as a business owner, I very quickly caught on and said, I need more of those affiliate people in my world. So what is it that, I'm a connector. And being a connector gal, and connecting is something I knew how to do long before I ever started a business. But being a connector means that I know a lot of people. And I know a lot of people with problems. I know a lot of people with problems that I cannot solve. But I also know a lot of solvers of problems. And so if I can connect those two people and deliver a transaction to somebody that they didn't have to work for, they're willing to compensate me for that transaction. So now I have these moving parts of network in my business that aren't just about me out there hustling. And I want you to not lose sight of the fact, and what a good word, lose sight of the fact that I'm legally blind and I don't drive. So anything about networking where you have to be mobile and take yourself somewhere is a challenge for me. I generally have to take a sighted guide, or I have a cane and then I can't get around a room, and it's a challenge. But I have learned to do this in the online world, build a strategically leveraged network by inviting people in, for example, to a networking session where I give away a little bit of information. We have a coffee in the breakout room. We have a chat. I'm scoping out the room and seeing who it is I want to connect with. And then going for a coffee later on and having a little conversation about what it is that we want to do. So we're going to very shortly go into a breakout room and talk about. So here's what I want you to do this time when you go into breakout room. Introduce yourselves. Somebody in the room can take the lead. There's always an emerging leader or two or three. Usually you can't shut them up. They're going to take the lead. Make sure everybody has equal airtime. And I want you to talk about some of the concepts that we've heard here this morning. You talk about money mindset. Talk about whether or not you agree with that, how it impacts your business. Talk about building a strategically leveraged network. Now we're in a very different, I moved here from Kitchener, Ontario, 17 years ago. I lived there for 10 years. Right after I moved here, not long after I moved here, the real estate world changed. I had a friend who lived in a house that she paid $119,000 for, and she sold it in Kitchener for $360,000, over asking. We're getting this here now, right? So the question is, like, who's getting in on that? Who are the people that have a strategically leveraged network that they're invited into a deal? Who are the people that never get a piece of the pie? We may have a tendency sometimes to complain about this and not understand that we have control over who we build relationships with. We're going to talk about impression management in the last segment, but these all link. Your ability to be able to show up for people as a professional.
All right, I'm just going to put myself on mute, Debbie, and
well, I'm going to ask you to see if there's any questions in the comments.
Of course, yes.
I did challenge them to come back with a question.
All right, so I'll just ask everyone to turn off their videos if you're coming back on, please. All right, we'll just get everyone to turn off their videos. I'm doing that as well. And that's the last of the breakout rooms, I believe, Debbie.
Excellent.
Yes, excellent. And everyone is back.
And we have questions in the comments.
Yes, we do. So we have a question, which is, what did Debbie do with the accountant that gave her the gift card the next time she sent them a referral?
Oh, that's too funny. So I have two stories around shifting into a series about affiliate revenue. So I was really surprised with the $100 gift card. I thought that was very, very generous and nice. And I contacted her. It was a woman, and I told her that. And I told her about my struggles. But what I also did was I didn't refer that other person who didn't have very good common sense, the person who didn't give me any more money. I got rid of that person. I have lots of accountant friends, but I have new relationships, and we have an agreed upon percentage. But even more than that, there was a deal where somebody wanted to sell their business, and they came in to see me and said, I heard you help people with stuff. And I said, that's beyond the scope of anything that I do. But I know somebody who doesn't. And I referred that, I just sent an email referral, and I didn't really expect anything, or, I wasn't savvy about business, about that kind of business. So anyway, within a very short period of time, I got a $50 gift card from Sobeys. And I thought, my little spider sense went off, and I phoned up two of my friends that I'm now developing relationships with, a lawyer and an accountant. And I said, I got this $50 gift card. What do you think? And they both looked at each other with a little bit of a chuckle. And they said, if you're referring a sale of a business, you can imagine what his commission would be on that sale. It'd be fairly big. And you should have gotten a percentage of that. So I didn't know how to do this. So I phoned the broker up, and I said, just wanted to let you know that I don't know what I don't know, but I know that you know what I don't know. So, and I think you're a good man. So I want to talk about what we're going to do going forward. And we did. And so that's a two-part process. One is an evaluation to see if you have a viable business that you could sell. That is a small fee. I got a percentage of that. I sent them an invoice, and the business is up for sale, and his commission, is going to be within about 100,000, and I'm going to get 6% of that. And that, that was the start of many transactions that look like that. So, yeah. Next question.
Yes, thanks, Debbie. We have a question from room 2, and how have you created sphere of influence in this online world where there are so many fewer chances to interact in person?
Oh, absolutely. And Tanya and I were actually talking about that in the main room while everybody was in the breakout room. And I put out a freebie. It's on my website. There's a freebie called How to Work a Virtual Room and Walk Away with More Than Leads. So, for example, you guys are showing up at this event this morning, even though you're all colleagues, but there may be people that want to meet each other, or let's say you're new to the industry and you want to meet somebody who's making multiple 6 figures, and you want to get in their orbit. So on the back end, you guys should be having conversations with private chat if the private chat feature is enabled, so you can set up coffee breaks and stuff. I mentioned to Tanya that if you, as a realtor, wanted to host for the community, and you would certainly cross-market with your colleagues in different industries, a virtual coffee break for first-time home buyers, what you need to know, or if you don't have your down payment, all of the stuff. I won't even pretend to know as much about your industry as you do. Bring them in and set up a format, something similar to this one here. Let them chat with one another, because that's where the rich information comes from. When you show up at a conference, like last week, I was an attendee, just like you guys, at a 3-day conference, and I walked away from that conference. Party. That's what I went looking for, other business coaches, and we're going after a piece of bigger business. In the virtual world. And I'm visually impaired and I don't get around well. So I've been in the virtual world long before COVID. And I now transact in 6 provinces, and I'm considered a Nova Scotia exporter. And I've done all of that virtually. So it is very possible. I love the question.
And Debbie, we have another question from Donna. With unconscious bias, how do you come to your aha moment?
So I think when you get the copy of the little ebook that Tanya is going to send out after, you're going to, this is going to talk about this in more detail. But the first step is to wonder if maybe that's what you have. And I know that it's beyond the scope of this little keynote, but I use techniques for removing barriers to money, and those include EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping, and affirmations, and all kinds of other little things that are about energy work, which seems kind of foo-foo, but when you're up against something inside you that's keeping you from being successful, you get kind of like, I'll try anything. So I come from the black and white world of we don't believe all that BS, to a place where if it's going to work, I'm going to try it. So get curious. And then maybe you want to come to my book club in the new year, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and you'll learn lots about what I do there. Last question, and then I'm going to go into the last piece and close out our time together.
Thank you, Debbie. I don't believe we have any additional questions.
Awesome.
All right.
So far we've talked about the importance of having the right mindset or the right attitude around money, and being okay with making money. It's not a linear process. You're still transacting, even though you may have your unconscious bias. And then I talked about the importance of a strategically leveraged network. And I can't stress the importance of the more connected you are, strategically connected, you won't work as hard for your money. And and people who are successful know that to be true. The other piece is impression management. And that is how you show up for your clients. And I'm not going to talk about what you post on Instagram or any of that stuff, even though it's all included in the impression management piece. But I got to tell you that I swear like a trooper. And I'm very proud of myself that I've been here as long as I have, and I haven't dropped the F-bomb once. And that is intentional. Because I now am very strategic about where I swear like a trooper at, because it offends people. And the one thing that Brian Tracy, I think, said in his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, was that you need to get to a place where you're looking at how you're getting in your own way. And I know how to swear, let me tell you, but it was getting in my way. You know, it was preventing me from doing business with certain people. And it was alienating people when I would be in front of a room and I would use foul language. There were people in the room that didn't like it. So I had to have a long, hard conversation with myself. And I decided that there's time and a place for everything. Impression management matters. Now, 10 years ago, I never could have stood in front of people and had a conversation like this. Not only would I have been intimidated by people who come from a different neck of the woods, but I didn't have the skill to be able to articulate what it is that I wanted to say. I didn't get here through any kind of luck. I got here by working my ass off and doing what needed to be done. By showing up one time, doing it wrong, picking myself up, doing it again, doing it over and over, till I figured out how to do it. So I know how I show up for people. I know that even though I'd love to look around the screen right now in the virtual world, and this ties in with impression management, I need to lock and load on that little aperture that I'm looking through, that's a camera, so that you on that end can have the appearance that I'm looking right at you and that I'm talking to you. And that's impression management. I could also be looking at my window or looking down at my notes or looking down to see who else is in the group. And I look disengaged when I'm doing that. So impression management is about how you look to other people. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage, because you have to ask other people how you look to them. And you have to then maybe eat a little humble pie when they tell you that people don't really like it when you do X, Y, Z. And I think we'll save the last 10, 12 minutes for any questions that might come up out of all that, out of any of that.
Thanks, Debbie. We do have one comment. It's from Chris. He says he likes that comment. What got you here won't get you there.
No, absolutely not. I love the book is phenomenal if you haven't read it. And it's absolutely right. Whenever I sit down and set goals, you know, with people, we do this thing every quarter to set revenue goals. And I say to them, it's all right for you to put down that you'd like to quadruple your revenue, but are you willing to become the person who could do that? Because the person you are today is able to achieve what you're achieving today. So let's just say you're bringing in, I don't know, $75,000 a year. That's who you are. In order to double that to 150,000, you have to develop knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Have to develop. Are you willing to do that work? I can't tell you the number of people that I meet who have this idea that they can make multiple six figures in business and not change who they are. Not doable. What got you here won't get you there.
Debbie, thanks. We have another question from Donna. Do you think you get more than one chance to make a good impression?
Yes, you absolutely do. You absolutely do. I meet people, you know, I am aware, self-aware of who I am and what I'm about. I'm very more masculine in the way that I think about money. I love making money. And, you know, I love doing business. I was conditioned to work with men in the military, and I communicate more like a man. And it rubs people the wrong way sometimes. And I get that. But I always know that when they get to know me, they're probably going to like me. So that first time when people are kind of indifferent and not really fond of her and yada, the next time I'm in front of that person or around them, I kind of like tip my hand a little bit and let them know about my very caring nature, or talk about my children or my parents who have dementia, and remove that, because people could say all she likes is making money, because that's what I talk about every single day. But I'm more than that. And we do have an opportunity to do it. I will say this, though, having coached people who've really messed up supremely, notice how I put messed up in there instead of what I normally would have put. You have to be confident enough to be able to go back and say, I messed up. Like, you have to be able to, if you want a second chance to make a first impression and you're an idiot the first time, you need to own that and say, I was wrong there. I shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done that, or whatever it might be.
And we have another comment from Angela. Great points. Thank you for addressing intentional behavior. Anything else, folks? Any other questions or of Debbie? No, nothing coming in at the moment, Debbie. So
Awesome.
yes, well, look, thank you so much for being a part of Stakeholder Forum and our keynote this week. We really, really appreciate it. And I think that we've all gotten a good piece of information to take with us in our careers. So Debbie, thank you again. And I will send a link out to your book and to your website, and folks can follow up with even more information.
Thank you very much, guys. Take it easy. I'll see you around.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks for joining us, everyone.